What's up, everyone? Welcome to the latest edition of the Made You a Mixtape podcast, the podcast that is basically the soundtrack of life. With me today, good friend and fellow podcast host Lance Phillips. Lance, welcome to the show.
Hey, Wes, good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Now, I mentioned you are a podcast host. You've got your new podcast up on all the audio streaming services right now, The Mixing Bowl. Tell us a little bit about the show.
So The Mixing Bowl, kind of backstory quick. I used to do a podcast with a couple of buddies called the Sports Cave podcast. Obviously, it was sports centric. And I've kind of, since that ended quite a few years ago, I've been wanting to get back into it. But I didn't want to pigeonhole myself into one specific topic, or I'm talking about sports or whatever it is. I felt pressure like having to come up with new stuff all the time. So since then, my interests have kind of diversified quite a bit. So I talk about more things. I'm interested in more things. And so the Mixing Bowl, aptly named, came because I don't want to do one specific topic. I want to have people on. I want to have guests. I want to talk about what they're interested in. It could be politics. It could be sports. It could be fitness and nutrition, as my first guest was on. And that's kind of where it goes. It's very Joe Rogan-esque in that, not in that there's full of conspiracy theories, but in that, I have guests on. I'm going to talk about what they're doing. And I'm going to start every show with a short monologue, 4 to 5 minutes, hopefully, where I'm talking about something that I'm passionate about that might be in the news recently, or just something that's come up in conversation that I want to talk about.
And for those of you who haven't listened to Lance's podcast, yes, I went through that full, like it was close to 2 hours, but it was a fascinating conversation, absolutely fascinating. Awesome. So highly recommend you go out and listen to the Mixing Bowl. You mentioned that you originally did a sports podcast and now you're working on this. Do you find by creating the Mixing Bowl podcast and having it more of kind of an open forum, it's a bit more freeing for you as a host to be able to, be on a show like that?
Totally. Like, it's even just after the first episode we finished, and I said to Artie, the guy who was on it with me, I said, that was way better than what I did before, because freeing is a great term. And it's just like, so my next guest, for instance, is a guy who played pro hockey in the AHL. He played over in Europe, played one NHL game, and he was an enforcer. And I can't wait to talk about this with him, about what he's gone through playing the game of hockey. So we're going from a guy who's a fitness and nutrition guy to a guy who was an enforcer in hockey. I've got another guest lined up who I'm going to talk to. He's written his first book that was dedicated to his daughter who experienced bullying in public school. He lives over in Japan. I actually went to high school with him. So again, just another fascinating topic that's really important when we talk about bullying and kids in school. So yeah, it's totally awesome to be able to do all these different subjects. And I'm not, like I said, I'm just not pigeonholed to one thing. It allows me to talk about things that I think are important, that other people are listening or are tuned into right now, and things that I'm passionate about. And there's not just, as you know, Wes, there's not just one thing that any of us are passionate about. There's many things. And I want to be able to talk about as many of them as I can.
One of the things that I've discovered in doing this show is that when you get through the conversation, when you get through the interview, it's almost even more satisfying for the conversation that you've had, because for an hour you get to sit there, or 2 hours, or however long the podcast goes, you get to sit there and have a really, really in-depth conversation. And the nice thing about that is that in the time of the coronavirus and the pandemic and being told to stay at home, we don't necessarily get those conversations that we normally have with people in our day-to-day lives. Is that, because you see a lot of podcasts popping up now, is that kind of the driving motivation, in that in this time of isolation, we're almost in search of conversation, whether we're having it with other people or we're listening to other people have that conversation?
Yeah, that's such a great point. And I know that, and just like you said, you made the point that having conversations that you might not otherwise have. And I think that's the gist of it. Like, so Sean McMorrow, my next guest, spent time in jail and had a drug problem and alcohol problem. And I've never had this conversation with him. And I've talked to him regularly because he works at a store not far from here. And I talk to him on the regular, and I've never obviously talked about that. So to be able to sit down and, hey, tell me about this experience that you went through, and tell me about, that is captivating stuff that I might not have a conversation with him unless we're out for a beer somewhere. So Yeah, I think that's a really important part of it. And you also mentioned people, really pining for conversation, and that's true. I mean, I don't know about you and your wife, but my wife and I have spent almost the entire pandemic together. And we've done that because we've been trying to do the right thing. We've been trying to avoid gatherings. We're not hanging out with people. I have one friend that I've hung out with this entire pandemic, just one. And he's kind of done the same, that we've just stuck to a small circle. But I haven't been able to get out and have these conversations with people and talk about things that are really on my mind or that I know are on their mind. It gives them an opportunity to do the same where they may not have had an opportunity to have these discussions. And I think that stuff's really important. And it's also allowed me to really tune in to issues and things that I might have otherwise just kind of let them pass me by without paying much attention to. And that's a really important thing as well, that I feel like I'm just way more tuned into things that are going on right now. And these conversations to me are really enthralling because I can really kind of immerse myself in them and be part of something that, again, I might have just not paid attention to otherwise.
Let this be a lesson to everybody, by the way. If you're looking for, someone in a partner, make sure you're with someone who you can have a conversation with, because you never know when you're going to be stuck at home with them for a year. I'm very lucky. I'm very lucky. My wife and I are rock solid. Like, we have great conversations. Like, she literally is my best friend. So I'm very lucky in that. One of the things I found very fascinating about your podcast is that you do start with that monologue. You do start with addressing, whatever issue you feel needs to be addressed at the time. And let's be honest, there are a lot of issues going on in the world today. Do you find being at home and being more attuned to everything that's kind of going on in the world and having those stories and those issues be amplified, that it's hard to tune out? And do you really want to tune them out?
Yeah. So just about your point about wife, I hope I didn't make it sound like Jen and I don't have good conversations, because we do. And I'm not sure how I get through some of the troubling things I've been through just without her. And like, we've laughed I think if anybody can be together as a couple and they can get through this pandemic as a couple, they can probably get through anything. And my confidence with her and our relationship was high going into the pandemic, and just coming, on the kind of the side where we're coming out. I know exactly where we are, and I'm fully confident where we're going from here. About what you said about tuning in and tuning out. So I have paid way more attention to news than I ever have. In fact, my sports watching is almost non-existent, almost totally non-existent. I've paid way more attention to news and what's going on, especially on the US side. I've really tried to educate myself on what's happening down there, just how the systems work politically and all that kind of thing. So there's been plenty of times when I come home from picking her up from work and I think, I can't watch the news. I can't do it tonight. I can't watch it. Like, we watch the CBC, the National. I've got a few CNN guys that I just really enjoy watching. And I don't pigeon myself to just CNN. I do watch some of the other coverages like Fox, just to get a talking point from the other side, shall we say. But see, I've got some CNN guys that I really like. Anderson Cooper, Chris Cuomo, and Don Lemon. And truthfully, the monologue of the podcast actually came from Don Lemon, because I really enjoy watching his monologues that he does when he starts his show. I just think he's, is he dramatic? Yeah, he's dramatic. He's probably a little overly dramatic, but I like that. And I really respect that about him. So that's kind of where I got the idea of the monologue, was watching him. But yeah, sorry, I'm off on a tangent. So going back to, I come home and I think I can't watch news. I need a break from it. Sit down, news is on. I turn it on. I just can't. I need to know what's going on, and I want to be involved in all the things that are happening. And while so many things are absolutely infuriating and so many things cause me stress that I frankly don't need, I still need to be informed of what those things are. Like, what's gone on in Atlanta the last couple of days? Do I wish I'd seen that? Do I wish I was privy to that? In a way, no. In a way, I wish I didn't have that stress on me or was feeling so much anger as I am in that regard towards that individual. But the same token, I need to know about these things. I want to know what's going on. I want to see how people, Asian people and people of minorities are dealing with these situations and how these things are evolving. And because my third guest, as I mentioned, the gentleman who wrote a book, he's a black guy that I went to school with. And, you know, part of the intent of the conversation is to talk to him about how he's adjusted to life given all that's gone on. And, you know, when he moved to Fenland Falls, where I grew up, he was the only black guy in the town. Oh, so I'd gone my entire schooling up to grade 10, I think, when he showed up, and I'd never had a black kid in school. Never. I was white only. So he's the first person that I ever interacted with in a school setting who was of a different skin color. So I say that because I'm interested in these things and I want to know about these things. And I think it's really important to keep up to date with what's going on in the world. And like you said, there's lots of times where I wish I could tune it out. And then there's other, and I watch them like, man, that added a lot of stress to my life and I'm pissed off, but I'm glad I watched it.
I think one of the both sad and interesting things about news coverage, and I'll admit I'm fully on the boat of I probably watch way too much news, and I know, basically this last year, I would fall asleep to it, and you wake up and there's still going on and on about everything that's horrible in the world. Yeah. But one of the things I find almost disconcerting about the 24-hour news networks, and this is nothing against the likes of Don Lemon, this is nothing against the likes of Anderson Cooper, but I find, as someone who works in the broadcast industry, I've always been of the opinion that news should be nonpartisan, literally go full Joe Friday, just the facts. But you have these networks that are you should never be able to describe a newspaper or a news network as left-wing or right-wing. Do you find the hyper-partisan coverage of news has almost made it worse for people who are watching?
Yeah, especially when it comes to U.S. news, that's the case, right? And I think a lot of that, especially on the political side, is because there's two parties, basically. There's Republican, there's Democrat. That's it. So you're kind of, that's, so you get these news agencies, like clearly CNN is a little more left bias. Fox is way more right bias. And yeah, I think that, I think you have to, if you're going to watch this type of stuff, I think you have to be aware of what is going on. You have to be aware of what you're watching. So if you're watching CNN and you're getting pissed off because it has a left slant to it, then that's on you, because you should know going into it that it's going to have that. So when I watch Fox, first of all, I can't tolerate some of those guys on Fox. I can not tolerate Tucker Carlson. The look of, he's got such a punchable face, and the look of him is so agitating, but I want to hear what he says and I go into it knowing that this is who he is. And I go into it knowing this is what I'm going to get. So I try to keep that mindset that I'm not going to get ticked off at this guy, even though he, in my opinion, is clearly a racist. And I'm not going to get mad at that, because I already know this going in. And it's about setting the expectation. I think if you set the expectations properly before you go into watching this stuff, then it's fine. But I do think that it does a bit of disservice when there isn't just pure bias, and we should be just spitting out pure facts when clearly that doesn't happen, right? There's opinion mixed in there. The monologues are almost entirely opinion when you listen to Lemon or Cuomo or some of these other guys, or Carlson, or whoever that other knucklehead is. I can't think of who he is on Fox with the silver hair. Anyways, nothing against silver hair, Wes, by the way. Hey, I rock my silver hair quite proudly. Thank you. I love it. You should. It's awesome. It's quite a mane. But yeah, I think that, it is doing people a disservice when they can't just get straight up facts. And I don't know when the time came that changed, and it's probably in the US, it's probably been like that forever, but we even see it in Canada a little bit. But I've been thinking about this the other day, we watch the National, and I'm all about the CBC. I think the journalism is really good on the CBC, but it would be hard for someone it'd be hard for those national hosts, as an example, because they obviously vote. They go out there and they vote for people in elections, and they vote maybe Andrew Chang votes liberal as example. It'd be hard to keep your bias to the side because that's the way you vote and that's what you that's what you stick to a little bit more. It'd be really tough to stay right down the middle in every single thing you do in journalism. I just think it'd be so hard and I say this as someone who's only really ever covered sports. I've never covered news. So, but I think I know where my loyalties lie. I know where my, I know what's important to me. And when I hear things that are the opposite of what my beliefs are, I'm like, it'd be so hard to keep on that straight and narrow as a news reporter. Does that make sense?
It does. I mean, I think part of my problem is that if you even the word news itself, right, was kind of like one of those like mashed together acronyms of notable events, weather, and sports, and nowhere in that is the word opinion. I did not know that. See, and we learned something today. It's an educational podcast.
I love it.
Right? But nowhere in that notable events, weather, and sports is their opinion. And I have no problem with people putting their opinion out there, but I don't think it should be on a news network. You have, Fox has multiple networks. CNN has multiple networks. They've got headline news and whatnot. It's almost like they should have national opinion network. It's and true. Then when you go to there, you sit there and say, well, I know exactly what I'm going for this.
That's a great point.
But Tucker Carlson's opinion is not news. Don Lemon's opinion is not news. Rachel Maddow's opinion is not news. And when you consider the amount of money that some of these people get, imagine. Like, what was it? Bill O'Reilly was making $20 million a year?
Yeah, it was ridiculous. Whatever. I don't remember the figure, but it was huge.
Imagine if a network were to take that $20 million a year that you're given to one guy and to put it into boots on ground, local journalism. Then you're actually getting news.
Yeah, I can't agree with you more on that. And I totally get the opinion thing. I mean, it's interesting to hear the opinion, but I agree with you that if we're talking news, we need to be factual. And we're slowly, in some cases, we're slowly drifting away from that. And in other cases, it's gone. Yeah. The factual part of it is gone. It doesn't even exist anymore. I mean, when you get into some of these far right networks, and again, I'm sticking with US here because I don't really know of any Canadian news networks or outlets that mimic OAN or Newsmax. I just don't know of any. So when you get into like those or that crazy guy on InfoWars, I can't think of his name, like, okay, so that's all you need to say is, because that's it, right? There's just no fact at all. Like there's nothing. So in some cases, we're so far away from factual and people, the scary thing is that people tune into this. That's the really scary part, is that people tune into it. They believe it. And people are getting their news from places like YouTube. Like I have a friend that regularly sends me links from YouTube, like check this out. And I click on it and inevitably it comes up with some source that I'm like, nope. I'm absolutely not watching that because it's nonsense. It's total nonsense. And it's hooking people, which is scary to me. And that's why facts in journalism is so incredibly important, to your point. It has to be the foundation of what journalism is. And if it's not, it's not real journalism, and we're totally doing a disservice to anybody out there watching it.
And the sad thing too is, as you've mentioned yourself, people are home. This is what they're watching. Like they're tuning into the news because they need to know, what are the numbers? How is the vaccine rollout happening? You can't turn away from the news in all of this. No. And then you're, on certain networks, if you're in Canada, I mean, CBC, I think, does a decent job of covering it and not being too hyper, I'm sure people who, vote conservative will sit there and say, well, the CBC's no. It's nowhere near. It's nowhere near.
No, for sure.
But down in the States, it's, it's either you're this or you're that. And, if you're not saying, if you don't agree with this, then you're wrong. And that seems to be what's thrown at everyone right now.
Yeah. And that's a great point. You see that a lot. And I think that I often wonder how much, I don't remember a divide from left and right as big as we're seeing right now. And I think that Trump has had a lot to do with that. His rhetoric and the way he talks to people and the way he divides people has created a chaos that is even being felt up here in Canada, and you're seeing it. And as someone who spent time out in Alberta, the divide here is real. It exists, and it's you get a lot of people who are, they're okay with that. Alberta can stay out there. Albertans are like, we supply, we're propping up Ontario and stuff like that. It's like, look, we're a country here. We need to work together. And I don't have a problem with people having their views one way or the other. That's fine. Just we have to be cohesive in this, and we have to appreciate other people's views and appreciate our own, but still be able to work together for a common goal. And I think that what's happened in the US has totally eroded that, and it's filtered up into Canada because we're so inundated with US news. We're seeing it way and way more up here in Canada as well. And I just, in my lifetime, and maybe I wasn't paying attention enough, but I don't remember a divide or divisiveness like we're seeing right now. I just do not recall it ever before. I don't remember it before Trump. It was obviously there, but not to me at the same level we're seeing it right now. And that's a problem. And again, going back to the news issue and facts, this is why facts are so important compared to opinion. And again, while I don't mind listening to opinion, I think your point is bang on that can't be in the news cycle where we need facts. And those facts are what allows us to hopefully get beyond this divisiveness and understand, like, yeah, that's right. That actually happened, and not denying it. And like, that's BS. That didn't happen. But the more people stay at home and the more people get these bizarro conspiracy theories and they get onto them and they think, oh yeah, that's true. That's true. Like, no, that's not a fact.
No.
That did not happen. That's not real. But you can't. And again, that's another thing I just don't recall in my time on this earth is conspiracy theory talk like we are seeing now. It's in some ways is debilitating, quite frankly, to listen to. And I have friends that are caught up in them. And I'm like, oh my word, like how did you get there? How did you get to that point? Because you just never seem like somebody who could be there. And I can't carry on conversations with them as much as I want to hear their side of it. Their side of it doesn't exist in a world of fact at all. So I can't carry on conversations with people who don't live in a world at least of some sort of fact.
Mm-hmm. And it was almost, in with all of that hyper partisan negative noise, and then listening to your podcast, which was very inspirational. It was very positive. Guy. It was very uplifting. Do you see, or do you hope that people will start to turn to podcasts like yours in search of more inspiration, in search of more positivity, as opposed to listening to the negative noise that's being thrown at them by, pretty much from every angle?
In a word, yes. And I'll say this, when we were spending time out in Alberta, I'm going to apologize ahead of time if my dog barks. When we were spending time out in Alberta, I was in a major league funk mentally, major funk mentally. And there came a point at around 2018 where I lost a friend that was really important to me, and it was because of my behavior. And it wasn't something that just happened like that. It had been building. When I think back about it, I can see how I was a toxic person to hang around with. And I made a decision that I was going to stop being that person. I made a decision that I was going to start choosing happiness over anger. I made a decision that I was going to start choosing to be kind to people over ignoring or not paying attention or not being kind to people. And while I have faltered along the way, I think overwhelmingly, I've succeeded in finding the happiness that I really want. And that's what I want for other people. It's so, once you find those things and once you start being kind to people and once you start finding happiness, the way it pays you back, it pays you back in ways you never expected. And the amount of work you put into finding those things and being kind, you get back in spades. And knowing that now and knowing how I feel about that taking that avenue. That's what I want people to feel. And so answer your question is yes. I want people to listen to the podcast and I want them to feel at least some sort of inspiration. So like my first podcast with the monologue about, how are you going to think about the way you acted and the way you behaved during this pandemic? Are you going to look back are you going to take a good hard look in the mirror? And what is going to come back at you? You're going to look at somebody and you're like, man, I'm super disappointed in this person who I'm looking at in the mirror. Or you're going to look at them and say, man, I'm really happy with what I did during this pandemic. I'm happy with the way I behaved. I'm really happy with I'm proud of myself for how I treated people and this and that. And I don't know that there's anybody that can look in the mirror and say, I'm really proud of how I've acted during this pandemic. Because I think everybody's faltered and for good reason. But the purpose of that was for people to hopefully listen to it and think, yeah, you know what? I can think of an incident right now where I didn't treat someone right, and I'm gonna change that, or I'm gonna do something different, or you know what, I do look in the mirror, but I don't take a good hard look. I just glance. I'm like, yeah, everything's cool. So my hope is that I could inspire some people to look in that mirror and see themselves for what they really are, and if that's a matter of making a change for the better, maybe they'll do it. And maybe they'll think, yeah, I definitely could have been better in this regard, or my behavior has been less than stellar in certain areas, or, I could be better to people, or I could be better to myself. And that's why that's part of the reason I had Artie on with that particular monologue, because he fit that narrative in that he is a very upbeat guy. And in the face of what I would classify as like, arguably one of the toughest times of his life, other than what he said he dealt with, like, given his business has really been struggling, gyms aren't open. He still manages to keep this inspirational tone about him. And he still manages to make me feel good and other people feel good. And those are the people I want to surround myself with. I want to surround myself with people that make me happy. And I hope that other people listening to that podcast got that vibe from him, that I can see how Lance likes this guy. I can see that he's an inspirational figure and he's someone who seems to be, constantly up when other people are feeling down. And, maybe that's someone I should try and hang out with. Or maybe they go to his store and say, hey, I heard you on this podcast. I just wanted to meet you and see what you're about. And I guarantee you, if they do that, they may not ever shop for supplements somewhere else, but they'll make a friend like instantly with him. He's a real class act, and I'm really fortunate that I stopped into his store to meet him. And I stopped in his store because I got a terrible experience at another supplement store near where I live, and that just spurred me to go to a different place. So I think I got just really lucky there.
Or sometimes fate just kind of points you in the right direction, the direction that you need to go. You talked about changing your mindset. Going from, what you yourself said was a toxic personality that you were exhibiting to starting to choose kindness. And you see so much of the dialogue out in the ether, whether it be on Twitter or on Facebook or, which is basically our only interactions with other people these days. And it so tends to skew negative, not kind. How hard is it to stop, take a look at yourself, pick out what you don't like, and then start to make those changes and choose kindness?
I think I think that it takes a very strong-willed person to do. I think that unless you really see the problem, and for me, it took that, because that problem wasn't something that had just happened. Like, it had been festering away for a period of time. It took me that incident where I knew I'd lost a friend that I'd been really good friends with for 15 years. I lost this friend who was the best man at my wedding, I might add. And that for me was the clicking point where I was like, I got to change, because if I don't change, he's not going to be the last one to leave. It's going to be other friends. God forbid, it's going to be my wife eventually that leaves. Family. I'd been running into some issues with family members. Just my dad, been binding with him a little bit. And I think for some people, it takes that moment in time where they're like, I got it. I see the problem. And for others, I fear that there's other people that just will never take that look in the mirror. They'll never acknowledge who they really are, And I think, like, going back to my original point, I think it takes someone who's really strong-willed to sit down and think about who they are deep down inside, think about who they've been, how they act, how their behaviors are, and really say, not only say, I'm going to make this change, but to actually go out and do it. It's not easy. And what I find most challenging about it on a day-to-day basis is mentally, I struggle. I struggle mentally. I struggle with depression, anxiety, to a lesser point, more depression. And the days that I wake up, for no apparent reason, I just am in that mood where I just like to pull the covers up over my head and never come out. Those are the days where when I'm out in the world, I got to really dig deep to be kind to people. And I promise anyone listening to this today, I promise you, and if it doesn't work for you, then you can reach out to me on social and tell me, hey, this is BS, but I'm telling you it's not. If you can dig down, and on the days that you feel the absolute worst, if you can pull it out of yourself to be kind to anybody out there, anybody, or just find that happiness or find that minute when you can go out and be kind to somebody, it will turn your day around like that. I know it because it's happened to me numerous times where a great example that I remember well, maybe about a year ago, there's a local Starbucks, and I was in a bad mood. I woke up that way. Mentally, I wasn't good. And I went into the Starbucks, and there was this girl that was in there, and she had a big smile on her face serving customers. And I looked at her and I thought, man, she's got a really good smile. She's got a really nice smile. So I went up to her and I said, hey, you have a really nice smile. You should use it all the time when you're in here. And the joy on her face when I said that to her turned my frown upside down. Such a bizarro term, but it did. It really did. And it changed my day for the better. And anytime I see her now, just whether it's on the street or in the Starbucks, we have a quick, meaningful conversation about, hey, how are you doing? Good. Hey, how's that smile? You still using it? Oh yeah, I haven't seen you in the store lately. I'm like, oh, I haven't been by, but I'll make sure I come in. We were on a first name basis, and I haven't seen her for a while now, but and that's what you get from it. That's what you get from being kind to people. And that's what you get from trying to find happiness is something meaningful when you just see someone on the street, because you've developed this relationship just from something so simple as saying, hey, you have a great smile. You should use it more while you're working. And I'm telling people if they can find that within themselves to do that, it will not only improve your life, but it will improve the lives of people you don't even know. And again, I said that in the monologue. And how is that possible? Because I improved her day, and I guarantee you that day she improved the demeanor of other people that she greeted in the store because I made her feel good, which made me feel good. And then she carried it on. So inadvertently throughout the day, I probably helped other people feel good about their day. And again, I feel like I'm off on a tangent here, but I just think
it's okay. We indulge tangents here. We're good.
So I really enjoyed your last podcast with Katie, and I remember she got off on a few herself. So that if she's getting off on them, I feel good about getting off on them too.
Nothing wrong with a good tangent.
So I think that, yeah, again, I'm going back to your original point. I think it's really tough to do it. I think it's really tough. And I think that if you have it within yourself to sit down and figure out what about yourself that you don't like that you can change for the positive, you will be way better off for it. Way better off. And not only you, again, people around you, people you don't even know. And I can tell you that from that time when I decided I was going to make that change, the improvement of my life has done a full circle. Again, I still have moments where I'm in a funk. I've been in a funk for about the last week, just mentally, and trying to get out of it has taken every ounce of my being. But overall, my relationship with my father is better. My relationship with my family, my sister is better. It's always been really strong with my mom. My relationship with Jen is not that our relationship was bad by any stretch, but it's definitely better because I try to be happier around her. My relationship with my friends are better. And if I find myself, if I'm out and I'm falling into a funk, I try to catch myself right away because I know the triggers, and I'm like, okay, I gotta either change this behavior or need to figure out how to get out of this situation that I'm in that's creating it. And yeah, so I think, there's a lot to unpack what I just said there, but the key fundamentals of, I think, what I said are: take a good look at yourself in the mirror, be very critical of who you are, and work to find happiness and find kind and be kind to people, because I think in the world we live in right now, a lot of people just find it easier to be negative. It's easier. It's easier. I can complain about things. It's easier to complain and it's not. It really isn't. In fact,
as much as you sit there and say, "Oh, I feel better now I vented." Yeah, but you've put it out there, right? You fed off negative energy.
And I created stress for myself in doing it, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, there's things that bother me that I like to talk about, but you're right. I mean, the venting is a form of creating stress and a form of negativity, right? And the venting that we talked about is something different, and that venting actually came from a place of me choosing to be happy over choosing to be not happy, and I made that decision because my happiness was the number one focus, and it's worked. I feel better about it. I'm still disappointed in how I got there, and that's another conversation. But anyways, yeah, it's happiness and kindness. It's not harder to do, and once you get doing it, you'll realize why was I ever the other way? Why was I ever toxic to be around? Why was I ever that person? Why, it's just once you do it, it's easy, and you'll reap huge benefits from it.
One of the things that's really come up in this past year is that aside from being the largest health crisis in over a century, it's also the largest mental health crisis,
big time,
that I think any of us could ever possibly even fathom. And you yourself mentioned that you dealt with mental health issues beforehand. How has this weighed on all of that? And do you find that it's going to be harder to pull out of it once we can start to get back to whatever new normal is going to be?
I think for me, the interesting thing about this is that this might sound weird, but it's been easier for me to deal with. I find it's been, and I'm using Jen as an example. Jen does not deal with mental health difficulties, but I do. And I've found that it's been easier for me to deal with the down periods than it has been for her. She's been in funks that I haven't seen out of her before, and it's been really difficult for her to work out of those. Whereas for me, I think because I've experienced them long before the pandemic hit, I know that it will pass, and that I can work hard to try and get out of it. It doesn't always work like that. It's not that simple where I just like, I'm out of it and I'm out of it. I'm not. It takes time, but at least I know it will pass. And I think for some people who have experienced the same type of mental health anguish that people like me have, they may not know if it's going to pass, and like, what the hell is going on here? And what am I experiencing? And they have a tendency, I think, to pull themselves farther and farther down because they're stressed more and more and more about how they're feeling mentally because it's new to them. And I think that that's happened with Jen. And I have a couple of friends that I've seen things in them that I have seen in myself, and I worry for them. And some of them don't like to talk about it. That's just who they are. And I'm an open book with this kind of stuff. But I think that, again, I said this in the monologue, that I worry about what the mental health repercussions are going to be when this is all said and done, because there is no way that some people are ever going to be what they would classify as their normal again. I just don't believe it. And I think, they're going to live with the repercussions of this pandemic mentally for the rest of their lives. And they're going to have to figure out how to deal with certain things. And I mentioned things like being OCD with washing hands and being paranoid about, I got to wash my hands because what about a strain of this thing? And they might be thinking of things that really don't even exist. They're just thinking of possibilities that could come up. And that's a form of mental health, and eating disorders and things like that. Because listen, I have had a very good relationship with Gortha Dairy ice cream since this pandemic started. Very good. And I put on 30 pounds. I'm 30 pounds heavier than I was pre-pandemic when I was in great shape. I'd gotten myself back to where I wanted to be, and I put on 30 pounds, and it affects you mentally when that kind of thing happens. And people are eating, they have more accessibility to food in their home because they're home more, they're eating more, they're doing all these things, they're putting on weight. It's going to contribute to eating disorders, I think. And again, that's mentally focused. And I worry about how people are going to get out of this once these vaccines are in everyone's arms and we're not walking around with masks anymore. It's a worrisome thing for me. And I don't I don't have a crystal ball to know what the end is going to look like, but I just believe in my heart of hearts that people are going to be affected for eternity.
When you, of course, this is the Made You a Mixtape podcast. So of course we got to get to talking about music a little bit here. So when you are dealing with the toughest times, you know, the times when you're down, the times when you're, you know, not necessarily struggling, but, you know, finding it difficult to deal with, do you ever find yourself leaning on, you know, music or certain types of music to kind of get you through those moments?
So it's okay to say struggling with, because there have been times throughout this pandemic where I have contemplated how I would go about ending my life. I've thought about that. I've thought of ways I could do it that would be the least with the least impact to people around me, as bizarre as that sounds, because there's no way you can do something like that and it's not impactful to people around you. I've contemplated how, you know, these different scenarios, how could I do it so it's not a gruesome thing, or how could I do it so that it, you know, that if someone finds me, they're not mortified by what they see, or they're not scarred for life by what they see. And I'm saying this because A, I don't mind telling people about it because I think it's important to get that stuff out there. And B, because I found a resource that helped me through a lot of those times. And I was mulling around on Facebook one day, and a friend of mine sent me an invite to a group that was called I Raved in Toronto in the 90s, the late 80s. I think it's late 80s, 90s, and 2000s. And so I signed up for the group. And in the group are people who are my age or older, you know, typically in their late 30s. I'm 42. I'll be 43 this year. So from late 30s to late 40s, typically, who experienced a time like I experienced in the mid to late 90s, early 2000s, in a scene in Toronto that was unlike anything that I think anybody will ever see again. And it's been a joy. It's been a joy to be on it, because everyone's sharing the music from those days that I was in love with, that, yeah, I still listen to, but I hadn't thought about it this way, and thinking like it's allowed me to reminisce about times before when I would hang out at all these parties and go to all these different clubs when I was in my 20s, and the amazing times that I had and the incredible people that I met doing it. And on this Facebook group are all these different songs. Like, do you remember this track? Do you remember this track? And people keep posting the links to all the tracks. I'm listening to them like, oh, this is amazing, right? And it just gets me so fired up, and so it makes me so happy. So in listening to your previous podcast, I always thought this question was weird, because I thought, how could people use music to really, you know, motivate them in a mental sense or emotionally. But then I think, well, that makes total sense. I mean, especially given what I'm experiencing when I go onto this group. And so whenever I feel down, I go onto this group, and I just, you know, if there isn't anything posted recently, I'll just go back and read stuff that was posted from 2 months ago that I've already seen, because it puts me in a good mood and it helps me out of the funk that I'm in. So yeah, music 100% has helped me come out of some of those funks that I've been in. And even just things like creating a playlist on my phone that's called Old House. That's all old house music from back in the day that I used to listen to. And I listen to it in my car, and the volume is high. The volume's high, like real high, so high that people in the cars next to me with my windows up and theirs can still hear it. Like, it's high, but it makes me high. It makes me high to listen to it. And it makes me, it's amazing how it can almost pull all the emotion of maybe hours ago thinking, what if I parked my car in the garage and just fell asleep with the car running in the garage? It pulls all that out and allows me to, even if it's for a fleeting moment, that's gone, and allows me to bring in the high I feel from listening to that and thinking about arguably one of the best times in my life, when I was partying in the late 90s and early 2000s with these people and listening to this great music. It's helped. There is no question it's helped. And it's pulled me out of like I just said, it's pulled me out of dire places Um, in some cases for an hour, in other cases for days. It's allowed me to leave that thought process behind and feel better about myself and feel better about just where I'm going.
First of all, before we get to the next question here, because we're gonna get back to that, I am so grateful that you chose, to not fall through on those thoughts, and we are able to sit here and have this conversation because, value your friendship, man. So thank you so much for not choosing that way. Secondly,
it's not easy though, man. Like it's tough. And I think, I always grew up with the mindset, and growing up as a kid, times are a lot different than they are now. So, taking your own life was considered extremely selfish. That's what, when I was a younger, when you heard of that kind of thing, it was like, oh, what a selfish move that is. And it couldn't be further from the truth. I don't think that anyone, unless they've actually been in that headspace or they've been in a situation where they know what that feeling is like, can really comment on it, because I have, and it's not selfish. It's literally feeling like there is no other way out. And it's feeling like you, this is so bizarre when I think about it now, but at the time when I'm having the irrational thoughts, it's not bizarre to me. It's for me, I think I'm helping other people around me by me not being around, because I think in some crazy mixed up way that their lives are better off if I'm not in it. It's so bizarre. Like when I think about it now, I'm like, it's crazy talk, but at the same time, it's irrational feelings and it's irrational thought. And I'm one of the lucky ones, I think, who catches myself in those and sometimes tries to find a way out, and other times is lucky to find a way out. Whereas we know lots of people with, whether we know them personally or we don't know them personally, we just know of them, who weren't able to grab that and say, I got to find my way out of this. They never did. And they followed through. And it's tough. I know you wanted to move on to something else. I just want to say that everybody's life is worth something. And even when I have those irrational thoughts, or when I'm feeling like I'm worthless, or I'm feeling like where I'm going is nowhere and people would be better off without me, I'm still worth something. And I think it's really important that other people having those thoughts or those feelings also know that they are worth something. Even if they think they're not, they're always worth something.
And it should be said too that, if you do, to all of our listeners, whether you're watching us on YouTube or whether you're listening to us right now on an audio streaming platform, that if you do, have these thoughts, if you do, struggle with this, please seek help. You are absolutely worth seeking help. Talk to somebody.
It's really important.
Just talk to somebody, because you don't have to go through this alone. I think that's first and foremost. You mentioned, like having someone in your life, and you kind of put it out there, that you are going to have a little someone soon in your life. How has that been? Knowing that you're going to be a dad. Like I'm a parent, so I know what I went through. Not anything bad, but like all the thoughts of like, well, how am I? How am I going to be a dad, right? So for you, how has that been? Learning that you're going to enter that new stage.
So as I mentioned, I'll be 43 in August, and I always, I was one of the late bloomers, shall we say, to the long-term relationship game. I spent a lot of time in my 20s and early 30s having a lot of fun, shall we say, out there in the world and doing different things. And I always kind of was like, I don't know about kids. And I had, this is my second marriage. So my first marriage, we had talked about it, and I think we both realized we just weren't really compatible. So the kids never came into the equation. But when I was out of that relationship, I thought, man, I'm really glad we don't have kids. And it made me think, oh, I think I'm fine without kids. And something changed my mind. I forget how this story went exactly, but I was told it by a friend. And I think that friend had a friend who was a PSW at a nursing home. And they said that the number one regret they hear from people in nursing homes is that they didn't have kids. And if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense. So I got a grandfather who's 99. He'll be 99 this year. And if he didn't have kids, he'd be in a nursing home by himself. Everybody he knows is dead. Everybody. His friends are gone. His brother is gone. He doesn't have anybody else. So, I think about it, I'm like, oh man, I don't want to be 90 years old or whatever it is in a nursing home and not have any kids or anything like that, or outlive my wife and, my sister or any of that kind of stuff. And that really resonated with me when I heard that. And I thought that makes a lot of sense. And I know Jen has always wanted to be a mom. Jen's always wanted to be a mom. And, I know that not being a mom would really bother her and would really kind of destroy something she's always wanted. And I think that, again, I think the pandemic made me realize that those days of needing to go out with friends and party, and those days of wanting to be free in whatever that freedom means in that regard, you can still do all those things. And I can still do all those things even if there's a third or a fourth person in our family. And what also I realize is that my favorite thing to do is to spend time with Jen. That's my favorite thing to do. That's what I love doing the most. She's at work right now. I can't wait till I go to get her, because that's when she's not here, I'm wishing she's here. And when she's here, I'm happy. So I realized that's what I love to do the most. So if I love doing that the most, if we add another person to the mix, it can't be worse. It can't be worse. It can only be better. It can only be better. And I think what solidified it for me is I went from a marriage where I knew it wasn't going to work not long into it, to a marriage where I know it will work. And I know that it will never not work. I just know, I know it will, based off what we've gone through. And what Jen has put up with me, she's put up with so far. I know that she's in it for the long haul. Oh, I'm not an easy person, but yeah. And so that's kind of what turned me the other way. And then we started trying, and we found out about a week after Christmas that Jen was pregnant. And so I'm excited about it. I'm excited about it, going to the ultrasounds and seeing this little thing kicking and doing all that. I'm like, look at that thing. That's a Phillips right there. That's a Phillips right there kicking away. The thing that terrifies me, quite frankly, is the money side of it. And why I say that is because I entered a career that doesn't pay me well. And not only that, through the pandemic, I have, I was laid off in the pandemic, and Jen is the breadwinner in our family by a long shot. She makes a lot more money than I do. So when she goes on mat leave, I'm worried about how we're going to make it work while she's on mat leave. We're trying to buy a house. We're trying to do all these things. We have car payment, blah, blah, blah. And how are we going to make this work with me not working full time right now? I'm hoping that will change. And if it does, awesome. If it doesn't, then I have to really make a go of my own little business. But that's the only thing that really terrifies me right now is the financial strain when she goes on maternity leave for a year. That's what I'm nervous about. I mean, and everyone says to me, you'll figure it out. My mom and dad, you'll figure it out. And I'm like, yeah, you're probably right, but that still doesn't make me feel better about the situation, knowing what's coming.
It's like seeing a long to-do list, saying, I know I have to get through this. Well, you'll figure out how to do it. Well, it's one of those things. I can say, from experience, because, I've got 2 kids. It has been the greatest thing, because, you get to see them grow up and whatnot, and they've just become such great little guys, and, the personalities just shine through. So it has been fascinating. But I mean, I remember too. I remember when we found out that we were going to have, our first, and it was very much like, okay, so now they're going to let me be a dad. But, and then after a while, as you sit there and go, I can't picture myself not being a dad, because it is the greatest thing. One of the things too that, that my wife and I also do quite a bit is we make sure that there's a lot of music in the house. Like I grew up listening to music. I grew up, as the kid, sitting by the stereo with the headphones on, listening to music. Did you have that experience growing up? And do you plan on having music around for the kid?
Wes, I'm so glad you hit on this topic. I'm so glad. So I was really lucky growing up as a kid. I was subjected to my dad and mom listening to classic rock, which at the time wasn't classic rock. It is now, but it wasn't then. And so like I have a deep rooting in classic rock and another genre that I know we're going to talk about later. So yeah, I mean, that was important to me as a kid. And it wasn't important to me as a kid. It wasn't important to me till I had a chance to think about it later in life and realize that was a big part of my upbringing, was that. And so when Jen's 16 weeks on Sunday. So when she starts to get the belly, you can be rest assured, I'm going to take this little speaker and I'm going to plug in my classic rock, and then plug in my old school house music, and I'm just going to put it on the belly and just be like, listen to this stuff right here. And yeah, for sure. When that kid grows up, when that kid comes out, I want to instill that love of things that I loved. Right. And obviously have her or him find her own or his own musical taste as well. And, but I think that knowing what I went through as a kid and knowing how I grew up with my parents' musical tastes, that had a large influence on me, and it still does to this day. Like when the Cult Fire Woman comes on, I can still picture my dad dancing to that and going crazy over it. And I love that kind of stuff. And I hope that I can instill that kind of thing in music to my kids as well. And I say kids, as we're hoping to have two. But yeah, I think that's a really important thing. And, it's funny. I got a friend of mine who signed up for the same Facebook group because he's found a lot of pleasure in it. And he's got two kids. I think his oldest is 9 and his youngest is 7 or something, 6. Anyways, so because he found this Facebook group, he's gone into the basement and pulled out all his old vinyl, and he's playing it and he's recording it and he's playing it in the car now for his kids. And he goes, Stella, his name's Bryce, says, Stella, how do you like this? And she said to him one day, Daddy, can we go back to the music with the voices like before you went and found that stuff in the basement? Like, it's incredible. And I said to him like, my kid's going to listen to that stuff. I am definitely going to play that stuff. My kid be like, this is the gospel of music right here. This is what you're listening to. This disco house from 1995 is musical genius right here. Like, but yeah, I mean, obviously I want them to find their own musical taste, but I want them to, and it's kind of weird when I think like, you know, I'm going to instill in my kid, hopefully, a real love for electronic music that I love. And I think there's something just weird about potentially a late 50s guy listening to electronic music because I haven't grown up with that. Because it's really my era of kids and my era of people who really listen to that stuff. And we're not at that age yet. So anyone like, what are we, Gen Xers? So anyone who's the generation before us was still really listening to a lot of classic rock and stuff like that. So it's just fascinating to me so on this group, we see people post pictures of themselves, like, it's amazing, with glow sticks and like all their old like rave pants that were at like the bottoms that were like that big around. And
I was going to say, like, I have problem trying to picture, you know, glow stick Lance partying it up.
I'm telling you, I spent so many nights in the government with like the little glow stick in my mouth and like some in my fingers, but not like I was a glow stick kid or anything. I don't know. It was fun. But I see these guys that post themselves dancing in their living room, just having some fun and just kind of like, hey, check me out. Like, going back to like 95 or something. And I'm like, this is incredible because this is the first time that I am seeing a generation do this online with this kind of music. And it's cool, but at the same time, I find it kind of weird. I'm like, is this guy going to do this because he's 50? I think that guy said he was 50. So like when he's 60, is he still going to do that? Like, I'm like, to me, it's weird. I'm like, I can't imagine a 60-year-old man listening to this music because my dad's 68 and he loves classic rock. Right. But again, it's just as my generation gets older, that's the musical taste for a lot of people that I hung out with. And yeah, I hope my kid loves that kind of stuff. I hope my kid,
as someone in their mid 40s, right? Yeah. And looking ahead to what I'm still going to be, that guy who's 60 years old in the pit at the metal show.
I love it. And I think that's awesome. And it's not, I don't know why I find that less weird than a 60-year-old guy listening to electronic music. I don't know why. I just don't. But I still think there's the cool aspect of that. And I think, like, when I think of you, I see a rocker for life, right? And I see a guy who, 100% would be in the pit in a rock concert. And I'm like, that's Jason Whistle. That's who he is, right? That image of you to me is just, that's who you are, right? But when I think about people that I hung out with and people that I spent time with in nightclubs and at parties and stuff, and when we're 60 and, maybe we were hanging out and he or she puts on a song or we hear some music or we go to an EDM concert or something, I'll think, this is who we are. This is who we are. This is what we loved. And it won't be weird to me in the moment. But when I think about it now, I think ahead and I think into the future, I'm like, boy, it certainly sounds weird for like people potentially in their late 60s, maybe listening to like old house music from the 90s. I'm always like, man, that's so strange to me. And like our kids, so like, you see guys, you see guys cruising around their cars and their windows are down and they're playing like heavy metal or something. And you're always kind of like, that guy's living his best life, like just cruising around. Like, our kid's going to look at me when I'm 55 or 60 cruising around listening to my electronic music and being like, that guy's living his midlife crisis right now, right? But that's what I listen to. That's just what I listen to, right? Anyways.
So normally I ask our guests, what was the first album they went out and bought for themselves with their own money? But I'm going to change that one up here.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm going to ask you, Lance, what is the first album you're going to buy for your kid?
First album I'm going to buy for my kid. This is a tough one. This is a real toss up. There's two that I can think of right off the top of my head. And oddly enough, I've got them written down here for maybe something else. But anyways, I'm going to go with co-winners here. I have to, because there's no way I can pick. So the first one would be Canada's best band, the best band to come out of Canada in all of history, and quite possibly one of the top 5 bands in my opinion in the history of rock, and that's Rush. I would buy them the greatest of Rush album.
Right.
Rush is unflippin' believable, and I know we're going to talk about that later. So Rush. The other one I would buy would be the OG Daft Punk album from 1994, Homework. Oh, wow. Would be the other one. Daft Punk just recently announced that they're separating. So the two guys are Guy Manuel de Homem Christo and oh my goodness, can't believe I can't think of his name now. That's so bad.
Wait, they had names? It wasn't just one guy was Daft, the other guy was Punk?
Yeah, one guy was a tall, skinny guy, Thomas Bangalter, and the other guy was a short, kind of chunkier guy, and his name was Guy Manuel de Homem Christo. And so they just recently split up. I'm telling you, that 94 Daft Punk album still exists in my playlist, and it for however many years it's been, I don't even know, what are we talking, 27 years, that album still bangs hard. Like, it is unbelievable how it is still relevant today. So those would be the two. I'd pick a best of Rush, and I'd pick that original 94 Daft Punk album, Homework. It's just, that's
okay.
It.
You mentioned the best of Rush, but there are different Rush eras. For Rush fans, there are definitely different Rush eras, because there was, there was the original classic era, and then there was the, hey, we learned how to play keyboards era, and then there was the, hey, we remembered to put the keyboards away era. What, when you're dealing with the best of Rush, what is to you the best of Rush?
So it's interesting you say that about those eras, because I know what you're talking about, and then at the same time, I don't really know what you're talking about. I say I know what you're talking about because I've heard this before, but I can't pick it out in my mind. If you name a song like that one, or I can tell you the ones that I'm like, boom. So like, I'm not going to tell you the song I have written on this piece of paper here, because I know we're going to get to it. But I will tell you that like Limelight is an absolute, just an all-timer. Limelight's an all-timer. Tom Sawyer is an all-timer. Like the Tom Sawyer song, just for a variety of reasons. So like, I was always a Trailer Park Boys fan. So like the episode where Ricky steals Alex Lifeson, like steals him and kidnaps him, and Bubbles and Julian come into the trailer, and Ricky goes, guys, I got something to show you, come in here. And Alex Lifeson is taped up with a guitar, and I think his arms are taped, and Ricky goes, Alex, play I Like to Rock. And Alex goes, that's April Wine. And he goes, well, play that Chuck Sawyer song, I don't care, or whatever he says, but he doesn't say Tom Sawyer. It's so funny. But anyways, yeah, like Tom Sawyer is another good one. Just, I think that like those tracks in particular really stand out to me. And then the other one I have written down here, just, I don't know. I don't really know the eras of Rush that well. I just know the three guys, the incredible singer, that had like vocal cords that I could never imagine another man having. And Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson doing what he did on the guitar, which I know you appreciate. And Neil Peart, who, rest his soul, was a magician on the drums, like an absolute magician. And this argument has been had before, you know, people, I've seen these articles posted on Reddit, like who's the best drummer of all time? And I'll stand behind Neil Peart, and other people are like, oh no, he's not even close. But it's an opinion, it's subjective. So my opinion is that Neil Peart was incredible. Arguably the best drummer of all time. And I wasn't the only one that said that, but yeah, I don't know the eras that well. I just know the songs that I like and the songs that resonate with me, and the ones that I listen to and I'm like, that is unbelievable. That's unbelievable, that song. So, yeah.
I may be having like a little bit of a anti-Canadian confession here. I have never actually watched a full episode of the Trailer Park Boys.
Oh my word.
Which I find funny because, you know, like Bubbles, and for anyone who's never watched the Trailer Park Boys, there's one character, Bubbles, like straight up Coke bottle, like glasses, the whole works. He was in this band Sandbox that put out two albums.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah, the singer was like Anne Murray's cousin. Those two albums are phenomenal. I'd listened to them like nonstop when those, but never watched the Trailer Park Boys.
So I knew he was, sorry to interrupt you, Wes. I knew he was in the band, but I haven't listened to the music. So now that you've mentioned it again, I'm going to. Side note, I forgot about like Spirit of Radio and Subdivisions. Subdivisions is just like another really strong one. But anyways, yeah. So I think that while you've missed out on watching Trailer Park Boys, at the same time, you haven't gotten dumber from watching Trailer Park Boys. Like watching the show fries brain cells, but it's still, and it was a worthwhile watch up until I think Netflix got a hold of it at some point, and you could tell the production value went way up, but the storyline started to get like, it wasn't good anymore. The best of the Trailer Park Boys was when the production value was really low, is when it was at its best. But yeah, you've sort of missed out. I would urge you, I could throw a couple episodes your way. I would urge you to go watch them. Just, it's like nothing you'll ever see. It's just wild stuff. But yeah, it's quite a show. But anyways, that's my story about Rush and Alex Lifeson being tied up and play I Like to Rock. That's April Wine.
Oh man. So when you put out the announcement that you were expecting, you did it in a phenomenal video, and it brings up the fact that you also have your own production company. What got you to the point of wanting to start your own, small now, but soon to be much bigger video production business?
First of all, thank you on the video. I really appreciate it. It was a lot of fun to do, and it's really tough filming yourself. It's really hard when you don't have someone to hold a camera. Anyways, so when I left school, for those of you who don't know about me and my schooling, I went back to school at the College of Sports Media when I was 36 years old. And I was fortunate enough to have teachers like Wes here as my editing teacher. And Wes, I learned a ton from you in editing. And I think that those first 2 semesters with you really kind of sealed my enjoyment of sitting down and building something from just cutting up clips, like taking clips and cutting them up. And I was also really fascinated with learning about, we work on non-linear editing systems, but I was fascinated about learning about how people edited with tape. Like I can't imagine that. Like I just can't fathom that.
As someone who's been there, yeah. Well,
I know, because you would tell these stories and I'm just like, that is mind-boggling. So I really enjoyed the editing. I really enjoyed that. And that's kudos to you for making those classes as enjoyable as they were, that people like me thought this is fun. I enjoy this. Yeah, I'm not getting exercise doing it, but I am in a way in my mind, but it was just fun to do those things. And like the speed editing, like, you know, I'm like trying to get it done, right? Like trying to finish it, but I love those things. And so that was a help. And after school, I was really fortunate. I had 2 internships. One was with Sportsnet. The other one is what ultimately led me on the path. And it was with the Toronto Argonauts. And I was really lucky with the Argonauts to work under a guy named Alex Anthony. And I don't know, his name isn't terribly well known in Toronto, but it is, some people know who he is. And he was an editor for the Argos doing all their video work. And he, at a young age, really had a love of video and motion picture work. And he instilled that in me in the time I worked with him. And I only had 6 months with him, but he really taught me a ton in those 6 months. And at the time, in the 6 months, while I tried to absorb as much as I could, it was kind of overwhelming at the same time, as I was learning a ton of new camera tricks and camera settings and things like that I didn't learn under the great Paul Smith at the College of Sports Media, because that's not what we were taught. We were taught broadcasting camera work. And as much as I love Paul and I loved what he taught us, he didn't get into that end of it. He didn't get into like the more cinema style shooting and those types of things, and using aperture settings and how does aperture relate to light coming into the camera, and ISO and shutter speeds, and how using a higher shutter speed can change this in your film, using a lower one does this. And so like all these different camera techniques that I learned from Alex really helped me. So when I went out I got a job I got a job on air doing sports reporting in Alberta at a local news station. So we went out there and I enjoyed the work. It was awesome doing local sports. And I do have something I want to say about local sports after this, but it was awesome shooting local sports. And I was a one-man crew. I was doing everything. I was shooting. I was editing my stories. I was putting them together. I was in front of the camera when there wasn't a guy operating the camera. So I was doing all this stuff, all the interviews, everything. I was the only guy in sports. And I was doing 2 stories a day minimum every single day. I was putting 2 stories a day together. And to say it was a lot of work was an understatement. It was a pile of work. And on some cases, when I had the stories, I did 3. And I know the amount of work I put into it. And I think what I did by doing that is to some extent, I burnt myself out a little, and I started to get a little bit upset that my opportunity to move on hadn't happened. And I think a large reason it hadn't happened was because local sports across the country, especially on the CTV side, got cut. And that was the graduation scale. So my next graduation would have been to like Saskatoon, and it was gone. It didn't exist anymore. So I was starting to get a little bit upset that I hadn't had a chance to move on after being there for however long I had. I think it was about a year. But in that time, one of the really cool things I got to do was cover college sports. And my dad used to coach college hockey when I was a kid. I have a real affinity for college sports, especially on the Canadian side, because those kids are doing it for nothing. They're doing it for the love of the game. The scholarships aren't what they are in the US. The crowds aren't what they are in the US. After you're finished Canadian college sports, your chances of doing anything at the pro level are greatly diminished, because it's just not that it's not that level. So these kids are out there just doing it because they love it. And I love that. So I had the amazing opportunity to cover a college out there that is one of the smallest in the country, that had some of the greatest teams in the country. And so what I decided to do was I was thinking back to my time with the Argonauts. I thought, actually, it came up that Alex had his Panasonic GH4 he was going to sell. And he called me and said, would you be interested? And at the time I said, no, I don't have any use for it. And then I got thinking about it. I was like, what if I bought this thing and I got a couple of small pieces of gear and I started making, I called them New Cap Originals. So I started making these original content pieces that were exclusive to New Cap Television, that I could do it in kind of a more cinematic way, with a different, instead of carrying the giant Panasonic P2 camcorder from 19 whatever it was that we were still shooting in 4x3, that I could use something widescreen and do it in using different camera movements, using different techniques, different lighting techniques. And so I bought it. And that was the first foray into producing videos in a different format than we typically see on the news cycle. And news outlets are getting better at that, by the way. But and then I bought I bought a stabilizer. I bought a GlideCam HD 2000, just a small manual stabilizer to start doing some different things. I added more things. I started adding more things. The college, then I went to the college and said, hey, I went to the athletics department and said, hey, what if I put together some content for you guys you could use on your social channels, and it could be something that you could utilize to hopefully get other kids interested in coming to your school for sports. And so they agreed to it. And on a part-time basis for about 3 months, I used this equipment that I had bought, and the college bought a couple pieces themselves, mainly in the lighting department. And I started doing this work and I loved it. I was like instantly in love. And I realized why Alex loved doing it so much, because I was given full autonomy to do what I wanted. And I was only limited by my own creativity, right? I wasn't limited by having to, the sports segment on our news channel. I wasn't limited by whatever else was going on in our newsroom. I could do what I wanted, and I could upload it to all these different platforms, and I could engage with people in a different way. And the college saw a huge benefit from it, like massive benefit. And then I decided I would chase money. I went to the college and said, I'd be interested in doing this full time. So the college essentially put together a full-time job for me, and I left my job in sports on television to do this job with the college because it was going to pay me quite a bit more. In hindsight, was that a mistake? Yes and no. I think in choosing money was not a choice that was great for my happiness, but in moving to shoot just specifically college players and be around these athletes was great for my happiness. So while I was making more money and that didn't make me happy, being around the students and the student athletes made me happy. And so I bought more gear. I started buying more stuff. I upgraded my camera. I bought more lenses. I spent thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars on gear, and was producing this stuff for a year for the college. And then unfortunately, I just ran out of patience for the politics that went on within the college. But I was really fortunate. During my time at the television station, I was able to cover a women's volleyball team that won the Canadian championships. So this school has roughly 800 kids. They won the Canadian championships the one year. Then the next year when I was working for the school, they finished third at the Canadian championships. And I was able to cover all that stuff on my own with my own autonomy, which was awesome. So then the opportunity came back to move to Ontario, and the business came, and I've just kind of worked on trying to build it up to something, but I didn't really do that for the first long while we were here. I got a job at TSN, and the video business kind of went to the side. And then I thought, I'm going to start putting work into it. I'm going to start doing some things. And so I did a real estate video for a guy who lives up near where my mom lives that was a big time success. And the real estate agency, I just made it for the guy who owned the property to help him sell the house, not for the agency, but the agency saw it. And they reached out to me and said, hey, would you be interested in talking to us about putting together blah, blah, blah. So I'm right now still in the middle of working on a film for their real estate agency. I'm working on another film for a friend of mine who owns a home cocktail company. So he essentially builds cocktails in his apartment, and then people order them online, and he sends them over. He delivers them to your house. So you can make bar quality cocktails at your home. So, and he provides everything, instructions, everything. So I'm making a film for that. And during my time sorry, this is kind of going on for a long time. During my time in Lloydminster, where I was doing the television work, a job came up for Hockey Canada for video production while I was at the college. And I applied for it. And I went through 3 interviews, and I didn't get the job. It went to somebody else. And while I was semi-devastated that I didn't get the job, because I thought this is a move that could be a rest of my life move. We can move to Calgary. We can move to a place where I'd be way happier. The mountains are close by for snowboarding, and I can work within this organization that I've heard only good things about. And the work I'd be doing is more at the grassroots level. And I didn't get the job, but I regularly stayed in touch with the hiring manager for that position. And we kept in contact regularly. And then an opportunity came up for me to freelance for Hockey Canada. So since I've been back in Toronto, I've been freelancing for Hockey Canada, going out and shooting stories for what's called the Hockey Canada Champion right now. I've done some editing for the World Junior tournament. I put together a couple of edits that they needed as well. But right now my focus is So people who are doing great things within the hockey community, you can nominate them through Hockey Canada and Scotiabank sponsors it. And then a winner's chosen, and they're called a Hockey Canada champion, and they're monthly winners. So if they're in Ontario, because I can't really travel because of COVID right now, Hockey Canada sends me out to film and put together all the filming parts of it, interviews, and then I send that footage back and they build the story. And I am so grateful for that opportunity, because I've realized since I finished school, I thought that for me, the be all end all was going to be working in the pro sports environment. And I think the more that I worked in the pro sports environment, the more I realized I didn't like it. And the more I worked at the grassroots level, covering stories about average people doing great things, it made me realize that's what I really love to do. That's what I love to do. I want to tell the story about a guy who's a triple amputee who became one of the best triple amputee golfers in the world after having his left arm and leg removed from a tractor accident, and his right thumb. He's become one of the best triple amputee golfers in the world. I want to tell that story. I want to tell the story about a girl who is roughly the same age as me, who grew up playing hockey with boys and had to change in the dingy old rooms because she couldn't change with the boys, and had to put up with the nonsense of boys, taking runs at her and stuff like that. And she's built herself into turning, essentially being the driving force behind girls hockey in Kincardine. That's where we just got back from on the weekend. I want to tell those stories. Those are inspiring to me. The pro level sports just doesn't interest me at all anymore. Not in the least. I'm so into the grassroots stuff. I'm so into telling those stories. And that's where I want my business to go. That's what I want the video production business to be, is telling. My thing right on the front screen says, we produce compelling films for organizations with a great story to tell. And the organizations can be organizations. It can be people. They can be teams. It could be anything with great stories to tell. That's what I want to do. And that's what I love to do. And that's how that business came to pass. And a lot of that is due to Alex Anthony and my internship I had with the Argonauts. I was really fortunate to get that. And right now is when I really realize how influential that was on my decision to go ahead with this. And while I was laid off with TSN during the pandemic, I've got my name in on another gig right now. I was interviewed for it. If I don't get that job, I'm going full time, full tilt into the video business. If I do get it, then I'm still going to probably just do it a little bit of a side hustle. But it's the only thing I don't like about it, Wes, truthfully, I could do without the pre-production part. I could do without all the paperwork and all the planning and all that. I'm not big on that part of it. But that is the most important piece of producing a film, because everything after that is dependent on that part of it.
Do not walk in saying, well, we'll fix it in post.
Yeah. Okay. So I did that like in some of my first stories. I 100% did that. I was like, we'll fix it in post, and then got to post and realized not having enough shots can't be fixed. Like that part can't be fixed. So not getting enough B-roll can't be fixed. So like, yeah, I learned the hard way, but I learned. And so I don't like the pre-production part of it, but when I'm done the film, or when I'm done it, and if it's my editing and I'm finished with it, I realize how important that was. And I'm thankful that I did go through that process. And I don't know. When I think about these stories that I've been really fortunate to put together, and these little films that, in the real scheme of things don't mean much, but to me, they're everything. And the people that I made them on still tell me to this day how much they meant to them. And, some of those college athletes I still talk to regularly, and they tell me that, and this is really this is the coolest thing I think some people have ever said to me. Some of them have said to me that I was one of the biggest parts of their college experience. And I'm like, that's awesome. When I hear that, like me just filming them and putting these stories together on them, that was one of the biggest parts of their college experience, man, that I know what my college experience is like. And to hear someone say that, I think that, if CSM had sports teams and we had a videographer covering them, and I was playing on those sports team, and I went to and thinking that videography would be one of the biggest keys to my college life. I can't imagine that, so that's really, it's cool to hear that. When I hear that stuff, that makes me want to move forward, and that makes me want to drive harder, and that makes me want to work harder. And then the imposter syndrome creeps in from time to time. And I got to fight that guy off. And that is a battle. That's I'm exhausted by the end. I get through that battle, but it's those little things and those people saying, man, we had such a great time. Or it's my contact at Hockey Canada calling me and saying, hey, I heard really great things about your shoot. Everyone really liked you. Everyone loved being around you and you're energetic. I'm like, yeah, that's because I love it. Because I love doing it. I love going out there and shooting these stories about people that nobody knows, but people find out about. And there's such great, inspiring stories. They're not about the guy making $35 million a year who's whining because he's not getting enough playing time. They're about people who are building communities around sports and just doing things extraordinary as average people, I think is really a cool thing.
Obviously, with a lot of people losing their jobs through this pandemic, you have almost like a swell of ground built small independent businesses, whether it's a video production company or it's something to do with their ability to bake and do or create, photography or whatever the case may be. You're starting to see a lot of, sole proprietor or homegrown businesses build up. As someone who's had their production company going for a little bit, as basically a small independent business owner, what advice would you give to someone who is thinking of taking their skills and creating an entity to build a career on?
Wes, this is such a great question. Like, this is such an important question, and I'm really glad you asked it because it's so key. I also want to say one more thing about the business. So the business name is Jack Abbey Productions, and this isn't a promotion so much as it is explaining where it came from. So when I came up with the business, I wanted to come up with a name, and I wanted a name to be authentic, because that's what I wanted to be in the business, was authentic. I wanted to be authentic to who I was. I wanted to be authentic about the stories I told. And someone offered up a name because I said that something that was really important to me was my dog. I used to have a dog. Even when I went to CSM, I had a dog named Abby, a little Jack Russell Terrier. And I said, I want it to be something that's meaningful to me. And somebody suggested Jack Abbey Productions. And I kind of balked at it a little bit. And then I thought, no, that's perfect. It's the dog, my old dog, my first dog named Abby, who was a Jack Russell Terrier, and then the production company. And my stepmom helped me design a logo. She had someone at her company do it outside of work, so she doesn't get in trouble. And he designed the logo off a picture of Abby, and I love it. And it's super authentic. And that's what I love about it the most, is that it's authentic. And I think it really plays to what I want to be with that company. So that was just a side story about the name of the company. So what would I tell people to do? I would tell people to go all in. Don't mess around. If this is what you want to do, put everything you've got into it, because if you go into it half-assed and you put half-assed work into it, you're going to get half-assed results. And I know this because since I got back to Toronto, I was going at it very half-assed, but in Alberta, I was going at it full tilt. I spent a pile of money on equipment. And then when I got the possible opportunity for Hockey Canada, that first came up on the radar. And when I first got that reach out about, or I got a lot of feedback on my real estate video I made for the guy, that's when I realized, okay, I got to start putting more work into this. And I think that's the most important thing. Don't doubt yourself. If you think that you want to start a business, you're obviously doing it because you probably have some skill in the area. I don't think many people, like, for instance, I don't think that I am going to start a business that involves me, doing magazine shoots for my body. Like, that's clearly that's not who I am. I love fitness industry, but that's not who I am. And I don't have a body for that. So I'm not going to do it. So I'm going to do something that I'm already passionate about and interested in. I think everyone else is kind of in the same boat. Well, you're a great example. You're in a band. Why are you in the band? You're not in the band because you hate being in a band or you hate playing music. You love it. So that's why
I do it for the free beer.
That's a great point. Man, I forgot about that perk. That's perfect. Yeah, but you do it because you love it and you love the beer, and that's awesome. And so people are doing these businesses, or people are getting involved in these things because they're interested, but you're only going to get out of it whatever you put into it. So promote yourself. Have confidence in yourself. I think that's the biggest thing, because I still struggle with that today. I still struggle with confidence, and I'll build a video and Jen says, that's incredible. And other people tell me that is amazing. And I'm like, yeah, but I don't know. This is different. So like the pregnancy video is a great example. I did something I hadn't done before where I colored that entirely in DaVinci Resolve, and I do all my work in Premiere, but I'm trying to get outside my comfort zone to get into more coloring, get more versed in coloring and grading, not so much correction, but grading films. And that was my first foray into DaVinci Resolve. And so are there things about it that I'm like, that's not quite right? Yeah, 100%. But the average person doesn't really know the difference. The average person's watching it and thinking, this is fantastic. And I got a lot of that. But I see the little faults in it. And I know someone like you would see the little faults in it. But I have to overcome that and be confident in what I'm doing. And I think that that's really important for people. Be confident in what you're doing. Don't get down on yourself if things aren't going your way. Keep pushing. And I say this all the time. And I said it in the last podcast I did with Artie, that the only way you're ever going to improve at something, the only way, is to get out of your comfort zone. It's not easy. God damn it. It's hard. It's impossible. But get outside your comfort zone. If you want to live in your comfort zone, your business is never going to thrive. So get outside of it. If you're kind of introverted, get out there and try to be extroverted. Promote yourself. Say hello to people. Meet people. Tell them about what you do. Be passionate about it. And something too that really resonated with me. There's an Alan Watts, a particular Alan Watts, theory isn't the right word, but something that he said, and he said, what if money were no object? And he goes on to talk about how, how would you live your life differently if money weren't in the picture? And one particular quote within that whole speech that he says, it's better to live your life in a meaningful way than, how's it go? It's better to live your life, it's better to live your life loving what you're doing than to spend your life in a meaningless way. And that really resonated with me, that I don't want to spend my life working for money. I don't want to spend my life doing things I don't want to do. And if you are someone who has a business, you want to do it because it's something you want to do, then go after it, and don't let the fear of not being able to make money stand in your way. Because if you're passionate about it, you will become good at it if you're not already good at it. And if you're already good at it, you will become great at it. And when you become great at it, people are going to pay you money to do it. And when you start making money, you realize how you can improve and you can do different things. And then the worry is gone. But don't worry about the money. You can work. Holy crap, you could work like at the local hardware store, just making some money on the side while you continue to grow your business. There's so many ways around that kind of stuff, but don't let the fear of your own fear get in the way. Sorry, I'm off on tangents again. Don't let your own fear get in the way, because everything that you desire is living on the other side of your fear. So don't let fear get in your way. Don't let the fear of not being able to make enough money get in your way. Don't let your self-doubt get in the way. Be confident in who you are and work your ass off for whatever it is you want to do. Because I'm telling you, people recognize other people working their ass off in the industry. And a good example of that is someone like Katie Caldwell. She works her ass off in the industry. And I'm moderately jealous of her, quite frankly, that she's done as well as she has. But she's done that well because she's worked her ass off to get there. And people recognize that stuff. And that's why I'm confident she gets gigs that she gets, because people see her working hard and she's improving. She's getting out of her comfort zone, and she's building that name, just like Joe Blow over here wants to build his name in his business. You can do it if you do all those things.
It's gotten to the point of the podcast that we get a little bit personal. It's not that we haven't been personal at all for the whole show, but time to get personal here. We got to the point where we have to ask, if you, Lance Phillips, were to introduce yourself to a total stranger, but instead of saying, this is who I am, you hand them a mixtape, and on that mixtape are a bunch of songs that tell the story of you. What's on that tape, and why are those songs there?
I'm not going to lie, Wes. The first time I heard this on your first podcast, it terrified me because I thought, because it was your first podcast, and I didn't know if it was something you were doing regularly or if you're just going to put these questions on the spot with people. And I forget who your first guest was. I think it was a woman who was writing, if I'm not mistaken.
No. It was AC. It was the remixer, Alex.
Oh yeah, that's right. Sorry. It threw me off, but then as I heard it, it was a common thing. I was like, okay, so I'm not as terrified anymore. So On my mixtape are 10 songs. These aren't necessarily my 10 favorite songs. Some are definitely up there and some just describe some things really well. So let me start with number 1. Number 1 is Led Zeppelin Kashmir. Simply because Led Zeppelin is arguably the best rock band of all time. All time. And I challenge anyone to debate that fact. Just an incredible, incredible band. And Kashmir just blows my ear holes out. And I just love it. And I love it because I grew up listening to Led Zeppelin with my dad. That's why. So there's the first bunch are a bunch of kind of classic rock tracks that really resonate with me. Kashmir is one of them. I just love the every time I hear it, I'm like, yes, volume up, windows down. Like I don't know. I love it. So Kashmir. The next one is Rush. And you could say that really any song with Rush could be classified in this group, but there's one in particular and it's called Big Money. And the reason I love this track, number one, Wiss, I think you'll appreciate the number one reason is because the final 30 seconds of Big Money absolutely pumps. Like that drum and guitar solo at the end of Big Money, the last 30 seconds is just mind-bogglingly good. Every time I hear it, I don't listen to the whole song again. I just go back and listen to the last 30 seconds over and over and over. But within that song are some lyrics that if people aren't aware of them, I think they should be. So it's about, essentially the song is about, it's about big money in the world and rich people essentially. So here's within the song, here's some lyrics that resonate with me. Sometimes building ivory towers, sometimes knocking castles down, sometimes building you a stairway, lock you underground. It's that old time religion. It's the kingdom they would rule. It's the fool on television getting paid to play the fool. And the lyrics in that song just really resonate with me because that's something that when they wrote the song, it was obviously important. And I'd argue it's become more important now with what's going on in the world and big money and the divide we're seeing between rich and poor.
And you mentioned it before, Neil Peart's the one who does the lyrics. So yeah, for sure. It's unbelievable. It's absolutely incredible. So that's one. The next one, Trooper, the boys in the bright white sports car. Oh boy.
Jerry, listen, Jack of all trades, Stan and Jerry the Garbage Man have my heart till the end of time. So the reason I chose this one is because these guys, when I hear this song, I envision these guys cruising around and like, I think of it as an old like Lamborghini Countach, like the OG of Lamborghinis. And that's what I classify as the OG of Lamborghinis because that's when I started getting into cars when the Countach was around. So I think of these guys driving around this car and like trying to attract girls, but they're just like average dudes. They're really nobody in particular. And so when I hear this song, it really harkens back to me in my 20s where I tried to be a bit of a ladies' man. Well, not try. That's what I lived for. And that's when I hear this song, it really takes me back to a time in my life where I enjoyed going out partying and I enjoyed flirting with girls and meeting new girls and going to different things. And so that's just, in my 20s, this song reminds me of that. Boston, Don't Look Back. So Boston, Don't Look Back, for a variety of reasons, even just the first verse, don't look back. Ooh, a new day is breaking. It's been too long since I felt this way. I don't mind where I get taken. The road is calling. Today is the day. And I like to think that even though I'm struggling in my career where I want to be right now, I like to think that some days I wake up and I think today's the day and I'm not looking back at what's happened in the past. And so Boston has numerous tracks that are incredibly good, but Don't Look Back resonates with me for that reason, that I have a tendency to reminisce about things that have happened in my past that I might regret or decisions I made that I regret. And I have to continually remind myself to not look back and to keep looking forward because a new day's breaking every time. Okay. Little known Lance fact. There used to be a television show on the corner of Queen and John Street at 299 Queen Street West called Electric Circus. Oh. And I was a dancer on Electric Circus for 2.5 years. And Did you not know this?
I did not know this story.
Oh, I thought you knew this. Okay.
Although none of the glow sticks make sense.
So I was a dancer on the show for about 2.5 years, arguably the most incredible 2.5 years I've ever had. Just so much fun. So much fun doing that, and like made so many lifelong friends from it. And so there's a track from that era called Music Sounds Better With You by Stardust. Now, going forward here, Wiss, a lot of these songs, I don't know if you'll recognize or not. You might have to look them up, and so will a lot of your listeners. But Music Sounds Better With You. And the reason I chose this is because it's a timeless song, that every time it came on, it had, and I've asked people this question, think of a song that if you hear the first 2, 3, 4 seconds of, you immediately are like, banger, banger, that's a song right there. And this is that track for me. When I hear it, it's my ringtone on my phone. When I hear the first few seconds, I can remember us being on that show, all of us. And when that track would come on, everybody in that studio would go, oh, and it would just go ballistic in there every time it came on. And it was one of those songs that really shaped my love of electronic music and really allows me to remember a time in my life that was ultra special, that again, nobody that I just don't think you'll ever experience that again, because I don't think those types of shows will ever happen again.
Which is a shame, because that was really when Much Music was at its best.
Absolutely.
There is not just Electric Circus, but you had the Pepsi Power Hour, and
you had, what was it? Pop-up
video.
Awesome. Pop-up video was amazing.
We were talking about pop-up video on this very podcast a few episodes ago with Crystal. Yeah.
It's so good, right? All the little facts that come up, and like Speaker's Corner, man, that is when it was at its best. It was so good. Again, just an era that we will never see again in television. Not in my lifetime, I don't think. Another one is, it's called Happy Days it's PJ, which is short for Paul Jacobs. So Paul Jacobs was a Toronto artist who remixed a song from 1980. And I'll see if I can find it here. So it was, Top North End featuring Michelle Wallace, and it was called Happy Days. So this particular electronic music track has 2 lines in it, and it just goes over and over and over again. And it's the first 2 lines of the actual song from 1980. These are those happy days. They make us feel okay. And every time I hear this song, I do feel okay. I feel great. And that's why I love it, because even if it's the worst day, it turns into these are those happy days. And they, what did I say? They make us feel okay. They make me feel okay. And that's why I love it. So there's another one. Have you ever heard of the group Basement Jaxx?
I have.
Okay. So Basement Jaxx was a wonky group in that they played all kinds of different tracks that had almost different genres within the same album. So like Romeo was one that was kind of like a real lyrical song. And then they had this other one that was a total opposite of that was called Fly Life. So Fly Life came in 2 versions, like a regular like radio edit. And then it came in another one called Fly Life Extra. XXTRA for those who want to know. Fly Life Extra, and Fly Life Extra is an absolute banger. And if you ask anyone who lived the club life in the late 90s and you said Fly Life to them, they will just go banger, banger. It was an unbelievable track. That is arguably my favorite electronic music track to this day, that I still get goosebumps when I listen to in my car. So that's just another one. And again, just a song that really puts me in a good mood. And I'm not going to lie, before the podcast, I was dancing in my living room to Basement Jaxx Fly Life Extra. Of course, this list is not complete without the great Daft Punk mixed in there. So this is a Daft Punk track, a remix. The original is by Scott Grooves. It's called Mothership Reconnection, Daft Punk remix. So Mothership Reconnection has some. It starts off with like kind of a weird beat, like a break beat almost off the start, and it's got lyrics. It says, "If you hear any noise, it's just me and the boys," and it just goes on, and then it gets into this. All of a sudden it changes, and it just gets into this massive hard hitting thing. And it was the song that we would request when we went to clubs because we wanted to hear it. My friend Bryce and I all the time. And we would absolutely obliterate the dance floor when this song came on. Like people would get out of the way because it was pure full on mayhem on the dance floor when this song came on. So Mothership, Reconnection, Scott Grooves. Another one is Mojo. You remember Mojo?
I don't actually.
Mojo is Lady, Hear Me Tonight. Cause my feeling is just so right.
Okay, yeah.
When we make love. Anyway, so Mojo had another track called Music Takes You Back. And the lyrics are real simple. It's another electronic music track. Music takes you back where you belong. Again, it totally resonates with me because when I listen to all these old tracks, and again, this is an old track. This is from probably very early 2000s. When I listen to all these tracks, when I listen to music, even when I listen to the classic rock, it takes me back. It takes me back to times in my life when I was enjoying things. And not that I don't enjoy life right now. There's just times that are a struggle. So it takes me back to times in my life that I really loved. Sorry, I keep playing with that thing that keeps falling. I'll put it aside.
That's all good.
And takes me back to my childhood with my mom and my dad and listening to classic rock and, maybe my dad singing Don Henley on the way home or something like that from a hockey game or my dad taking me to hockey games. So Music Takes You Back by Mojo is another one that just allows me to, when I hear it, to think about how music's influenced me from a young age, essentially. And the last one is totally a break from the norm. Florida Georgia Line, Stay. Now I chose this because it's kind of funny. So when Jen and I met, we'd been dating for a while and Jen says to me, so first of all, Jen is super naive and that's what I love about her. She's just a very naive person. I love that about her. And I remember her saying to me, Lance, what if we make this our song? And she played it for me. I'm like, Jen, this song's about a guy and his girlfriend breaking up and moving out from each other. Like, what do you mean we're going to make this our song? So like, if you listen to the lyrics, like I'd sell my soul just to see your face and I'd break my bones to heal your pain. And in these times, I need a saving grace, but time is running out and I'm starting to lose my faith. But if I told you I loved you, would it make you want to stay? I'm like, Jen, this has the opposite effect of what we're trying to do here. So anyways, Florida Georgia Line, Stay is on there because every time I hear it, I'm like, I laugh because of Jen saying to me, why don't we make this our song? And it's kind of an ongoing joke with Jen and I, about that particular time, but also it's clearly important in my life because Jen is my soul partner. She's everything to me. And I think that, I know she says I'm lucky to have found you, but the luck is the other way around. I am the lucky one. I am incredibly fortunate to have somebody like her by my side who puts up with me, who helps me through pain, who helps me heal, who tells me to chase my dreams, who walks the path with me when I'm trying to do things and try new things and is always helping me and by my side and just somebody that frankly I couldn't live without. And that's why that song is in there. So those are my 10.
Nice. And that's such a great spot to end on. Lance, thank you. Thank you so much for this. This has been an absolute great conversation. Where can we listen to the Mixing Bowl podcast? How can we find Jack Abbey Productions and where can we find you on social media?
Sometimes I wish I were back in the 90s when there wasn't a social media, but if you use it for positive, it's a good thing. So in that, let's keep that in mind when we use social media. You can find me on Twitter. I decided to get back on Twitter. I've got a very small following, but it's L Authentic P on Twitter. So LP, Lance Phillips. So L Authentic P on Twitter. You can also find me on Instagram, Lance.Phillips. That's pretty odd that you get the original Lance Phillips there basically. But so that's where you can find me. Jack Abbey Productions is the same across all platforms. Jack Abbey Prod can be found on your favorite Facebook, computer, Instagram, Twitter. Trying to use it a bit more. So there's some stuff there. And then the Mixing Bowl can be found on all your favorite podcast apps. It's out there. It's in the world. It's in the podcast verse. So look it up. Like I said, our next guest coming up was an enforcer in hockey. I'm really excited to talk to him and get his story. But Wes, it's funny. You asked me if I wanted to do this, and I said, yeah, I've been listening to Katie's and was listening to your other ones, and I'm like, yeah, I'd love to go on his podcast. So I really appreciate it. It's truly an honor to be on here with you, and I've always considered you a stand-up guy, a guy that I could lean on if I needed to talk to about something, and just one of the good guys. And in a world where I find it hard sometimes to find one of the good guys, you're one of the good guys. And I've always appreciated who you are and what you stand for and appreciated someone that I can call a friend. And I'm thankful you had me on today. Thank you.
The pleasure is absolutely mine, Lance. Thank you for everything. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your friendship. To all of our listeners, thank you for listening to the podcast. If you're listening to us on an audio streaming platform, you can find us on YouTube. And if you're watching us on YouTube right now, A, thanks for watching all the way through, but B, you can also find us and download us on Spotify, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, all the different streaming platforms. Thank you for watching the Made You a Mixtape podcast. Thank you for listening, and we will see you next time.